We got to start with one that was not on the menu, a little lighthearted. And I saw you taking the what is the word? The unpasteurized piss out of Matt Walsh. Look, I know that you know this better than I do, but I know what I understand. Raw milk is disgusting, he says. We live in a first world civilized society, and people are actively choosing to consume milk riddled with E. coli and listeria. Pasteurization is not some evil sorcery. It just kills the most dangerous bacteria. Robert, he's been taking a lot of crap for this. I say rightly so.
He's dumb as a doorknob. That's
well, I think he meant it somewhat lightheartedly. Then everyone has to double down.
No, he's obsessed with it. This is a guy who thinks video games are the great threat to humanity. Right? I mean, people ask why I don't take the Daily Wire seriously. Go back and look at Matt Walsh's 2016 Twitter account. He obsessively hated Trump and Trump supporters. He was a core never Trumper, like Ben Shapiro, and pretty much everybody at the Daily Wire was. So when the rubber hits the road, these guys run the wrong direction. So but what's extraordinary to me is, and I'll get answers like these overconfident, cocky responses that sound like they work for the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, where these people think they know something and they don't know it at all. So, for example, is unpasteurized milk full of E. coli? No, according to the government's own data, they don't have anyone that's died in 25 years from raw milk. Period. E. coli or anything else. Full of listeria, hogwash, complete garbage. He thinks, pasteurized milk only gets rid of the bad bacteria. Actually gets rid of the good bacteria. It gets rid of a bunch of things that are good for your gut. This is something we've been living on for centuries. And people, imagine being so suckered by propaganda. And this is a guy who pretends to be part of independent media. And here he is regurgitating some of the dumbest propaganda on the planet. It's what, in the Amos Miller case, they were relying on. They were relying on the judges to share the same prejudices from decades of being taught the wrong information by the government about our food supply and public health. It's why it's so important and significant, Robert Kennedy's alliance with President Trump in this campaign to make America healthy again. I mean, now a bunch of Americans have figured this out. Anybody that's ever really researched this topic universally concludes that raw milk presents no unique risks of any kind. That, in fact, when they've done the detailed surveys and been subject to the crucible of cross-examination, as Peg Coleman, Margaret Coleman, was as the witness in the Amos Miller case, who had previously worked for the Food and Drug Administration, was someone who was intimately aware of has been studying this issue for more than a quarter century. And what she found is that once you got through all the different ways they had tried to doctor the surveys and doctor the studies and manipulate the data, that in fact, when you do an honest, independent inquiry, you find out that pasteurized milk causes more health problems than raw milk does. And I mean direct health problems. I'm not even dealing with the indirect health problems, which are extensive and expansive. I'm talking about people drink it, getting sick, people drinking it, dying. You're at higher risk of that occurring from pasteurized milk than you are from raw milk. This is because people don't understand how food works. They don't understand how bacteria works. They don't understand the real history of what happened, particularly with milk. With a lot of things related to milk, it's very similar to what happened with vaccines. They took credit they claimed pasteurization fixed things that pasteurization had nothing to do with. Just like they claim vaccines fixed a bunch of diseases that actually have nothing to do with when you actually study the history. So it's amazing that somebody is so cocky in reporting it and repeating something that's so wrong. That, the only person that was a meaningful expert that I've known that's testified in court in the last quarter century is Margaret Coleman, subject to the government's cross-examination. They couldn't punch a single hole in a single aspect of her testimony. Anybody that's ever drank raw milk, almost all these people have never drank it at all. So they have no idea what they're talking about. But they've never studied it in any meaningful detail. They don't apply basic common sense. I mean, all we have to do is step back and ask ourselves, does a corporatized, industrialized, mechanized food supply make us healthier? Does that even make sense? But of course, we don't have to guess. We can just look at what's happened over the last half century. Chronic disease has exploded in the United States. We have the least amount of direct access to farm-to-table food in the world. And guess what? We're the least healthy in the world. And this is people are surprised that how resonant Robert Kennedy's message is on these topics that make America healthy again got viral right away. It's because ordinary people have been experiencing this now for 50 years. They've seen what's happened to them. They've seen what's happened to their children. They've seen what's happened to their loved ones. They've seen what's happened to their own bodies. Like we were taken for a ride by the government, their bogus food pyramid. That was basically corporate food supply, corporate food supply, corporate food supply, corporate food supply. And, inundated with chemicals they created out of a lab in New Jersey that are laced in a lot of your food products. And so it's that core misinformation that they've been feeding off of and feeding us into for decades that is fueling large parts of the Robert Kennedy movement that's now fueling President Trump's campaign and his continued surge and boost. But it's just like even Dr. Drew is this way. He was like, "Oh, I don't know if I would want to drink raw milk." And it's like, wow. So he's bought all the, bogus interpretations out there that this is not, it's a little tricky to research because the official government narrative is always bad, bad, bad. But notice the language they'll use. They'll use something like raw milk can be linked to, can have things that are in all food products.
Well, and not just that, but I'm just pulling it up while you're talking just to show people like, okay, fine. There's been 20, 30 cases that they've linked to raw milk. There was allegedly one death that they linked to it. I pulled it up for those who are listening in podcasts.
And the death we
broccoli,
just heard, by the way, in court.
Yeah,
Because you dug in and it turned out the death that they attributed to raw milk, they attributed to listeria in the patient. Problem was the listeria was there a year before when she hadn't drank any raw milk. And she died, by the way, of fourth stage cancer. I mean, this is why they use these kind of phrases. This is the reason why the government doesn't want any meaningful trial. That's why in Amos Miller case, they're obsessed with shutting it down without a trial. But, having him prohibited from operating before he gets a chance to have a full day in court because they can't hold up. When the FDA was sued, they walked away from all this. Thomas Massey, a real farmer, unlike, Matt Walsh, he only farms for clicks. Massey, a real farmer, real congressman, who's researched this issue in great detail, has been talking about it for a long time. Anybody that's experienced raw milk, grew up around raw milk, it's real milk. It's natural milk. It's not milk that has been changed or adulterated, which is what pasteurized milk and every other form of, almond milk and some of these other things are. Maybe in soy milk is Matt Walsh's idea of a healthy diet. But for the rest of us, give us milk right from the cow. And it's fantastic. But it's just striking the arrogance combined with ignorance of people like Matt Walsh. And it's commonplace throughout the professional managerial class. It's why we're in the problems we're in. It's why he reacted to Trump the way he did. They thought all their prejudices and bigotries were absolutely right. And they're absolutely wrong. It's why I have a problem with I'm part of the professional managerial class, but having been part of it, they're the last people on the planet I would want to govern anything. Your business, your life, your family, society, politics, you name it. They're an incompetent breed of people who are whose arrogance always exceeds their intelligence. And it's what makes them dangerous. Going around telling the world, you have to be a moron. I have an IQ of 85 in order to believe that raw milk could be good for you. You're just showing how stupid you are, Matt. I mean, it's an embarrassment. I mean, it was almost as embarrassing, but we'll discuss part of the, we're going to do a special Labor Day version of What Are the Odds with Richard Barris, People's Pundit Daily, 2 p.m. Eastern time. It'll be the last one for a couple of weeks because I have trials coming up. But we're going to discuss the politics of pot, the politics of abortion, the politics of food, and the way these issues shape up and why Trump is taking the balanced position on a lot of these issues that he is. But these people it's just
I did an informal poll on my Twitter feed, which is, I would dare say, mostly conservative, and 65% of the 20,000 people said they support legalizing marijuana. Then you compare that to, not to name any names, but people who say it's terrible, he's betraying the drug thing. Then you got the Lila Roses about the abortion issue, taking positions that even the vast majority on the conservative side are not aligned with. And I also just wanted to show, if Matt Walsh is afraid of E. coli, you never eat broccoli again. You never eat alfalfa sprouts again, because those are the things.
Of course, exactly. But leafy vegetables are the number one source of food illness. It's what they've done is the state has colluded with the big ag, the big corporations, to deceive people into believing only government approved,
Mhm.
corporate backed food is safe. When all of the empirical evidence, your own eyes from your lived experience tells you it's not. Because they have come to dominate the food supply in just 2 decades. And during that time period, we've become the most unhealthy people on the planet. So, and there's a clear correlation. You have the pharmaceutical attribute as well. But I mean, we've made our kids incredibly sick. I mean, what do you have to be hit in the face with before you realize how stupid it is to continue to believe corporate propaganda and government propaganda that their food supply is safer than what we used to have? You think your grandparents had a worse food supply than we got?
People will say that life
We
expectancy.
didn't have a chronic. Where were all the chronic diseases? Why did we have almost none of them 60 years ago, 70 years ago?
Like, not to play devil's advocate, they'll say that the life expectancy 100 years ago was much shorter, so you didn't have chronic diseases,
Yeah,
but you didn't have the
these
same
are
life
chronic
expectancy.
diseases for kids.
Yeah,
For children, we're talking about. It's an explosion of chronic disease in children. Life expectancy doesn't explain that. Life expectancy could explain the rise of cancer rates, but life expectancy can't explain the rise of cancer rates in kids. They can't explain the rise of autism in kids.
Mhm.
Can't explain the rise of a whole bunch of chronic. We have 60 plus chronic diseases now. I mean, most of the country, most kids have at least one chronic disease. At least one. This is insane. And yet, idiots like Matt Walsh think gender identity politics is the only thing that matters. He wonders why Bushite republicanism isn't popular. I mean, these people that are these sort of boomer con perspective is utterly out of touch with the world. But when Richard Barris polled the topic, he was shocked at how deeply popular food freedom is, about having direct access to farmer produced food is for people all across the country. But there's a reason they go to farmers markets. There's a reason why farmers markets are intensely popular, because they figured it out. They figured out that this government corporate crap is killing my kid. It's killing us, and I don't want it. Makes us miserable, makes us unhappy, has a whole bunch of other negative side effects as well. And the only people who still haven't figured it out is the political class. It's the judges, it's the lawyers, it's the legislators. They're the ones who don't get it, don't understand. There's a reason why when raw milk goes through legislative review in the last 20 years in over 40 states, they end up legalizing more access to it. Why is that? It's because they get all the evidence, all the information, and they're usually all shocked when the information shows, oh, hold on a second. It turns out that drinking the same milk our ancestors drank for centuries is actually pretty good for you. And that doing what you do with pasteurization, which removes a lot of the benefits of milk and the taste, by the way, ends up reducing the interest in milk and ends up reducing the health quality of milk.
This is Dr. Simon Godek, who just did an expose, seemingly, what's the word? Exposing the Krasenstein brothers as being less than savory characters. I'm going to have him on Tuesday, so stay tuned for that. But he's an actual scientist, and he's a smart guy at that. The graphic below is exactly why I stick to raw milk. If your microbiome is in good shape, consuming a few bad bacteria shouldn't be a problem. And then he goes through all of the fatty acids, proteins, whatever that get killed when you pasteurize milk, which is why French cheese tastes better. It's why pasteurized orange juice tastes like crap.
I mean, throughout Europe, this is commonplace. I mean, that's the extraordinary thing is like even government happy societies like Europe are more attuned to good food than we are in the United States. It was one of the points Robert Kennedy made. He goes, there's companies in Denmark that make certain drugs that in Denmark, they don't recommend for their own people. They just have us be the guinea pigs here in America. And it's just incredible. But I mean, it's Walsh repeating and regurgitating this utterly false information and doing it from a place of contemptuous arrogance of anyone who disagreed shows the problem in the methods of information gathering and communication that the Daily Wire crowd routinely runs afoul of. And that the institutional right, because they're so corporatist and often statist in their approach, often goes AWOL with. Imagine not to trust these kind of government sources for things like whether or not someone's a man or a woman, but suddenly you turn around and trust them. Classic Gellerman amnesia, as turned by Michael Crichton. You immediately trust them when it comes to milk. even though it betrays every form of common sense and historical knowledge and personal experience that everybody out there has. It just shows that's not someone you could ever trust on anything. I mean, because his method of learning is bad. His method of understanding things is bad. You can't trust somebody like that. Matt Walsh is just untrustworthy across the board. Too dumb to count on.